if you have an identity of being tough, the question is really, what are you gaining from it? Oh, feel good, it helps you center, maybe focus, maybe achieve certain things. But what you might be avoiding is a level of vulnerability.
We get stuck in who we are, ideas about who we are, and often it's unhelpful. So it is a fluid concept, and other parts of our experience need to be integrated into it. It usually makes for a richer life.
The identity is a little bit story, the scripts and stories we tell about ourselves. And it's very important to keep it open so that we can remain in touch with the world.
When we watch soccer, something happens that has nothing to do with soccer and everything to do with it. Welcome to the Golden Ball, where depth psychology and the beautiful game help us play life better. My name is John O'Brien, former World Cup soccer player and sports psychologist.
Hi, my name is Michiel Klerk. I am a psychotherapist, a lover of the game, and like to talk about depth psychology.
Hello, and my name is Akke-Jeanne Klerk. I'm a personal development coach, a lover of Jungian psychology, as well as soccer.
Today the topic is identity. And maybe before we start thinking about identity, Akke-Jeanne, what is identity according to you?
Yeah, I think identity is the answer to the question, who am I? And if you ask someone, who are you? What follows next is a story or maybe a collection of stories. And this collection of stories shapes how we experience the world and what we perceive. And usually we think of it as something permanent, something fixed inside of us. And we all have our own identities. And I think as a psychologist, it's really a psychological construct more than something fixed. But we can say much more about that. John, how would you define identity?
Well, I love what you said. I feel like in my work with athletes, a lot of times it is about helping them kind of see things a little more fluidly, right? We get stuck in who we are, ideas about who we are, and often it's unhelpful. So it is a fluid concept, and other parts of our experience need to be integrated into it. It usually makes for a richer life. And so that's like part of my work I see is helping people, learn to know other parts of themselves or different parts of themselves that they didn't know existed. And that's such a great thing about depth psychology and symbol work.
Yeah, and identity is indeed a fluid phenomenon, and in my vision, it lives on top of character. So you have a character, you can be an assertive person or an aggressive person, and then your identity might be like I'm a fighter, and if you then that is something you tell yourself. The assertiveness and aggressiveness can be many things besides just being a fighter. So the identity is a little bit story, the scripts and stories we tell about ourselves. And it's very important to keep it open so that we can remain in touch with the world.
Yeah, and I agree. I hear you say stories. We tell ourselves stories about who we are. But of course, some of those stories we might have chosen or selected consciously, but part of the stories that we tell ourselves are really about unconscious scripts, something that originates in the family of origin. If I felt like I had little power and I wanted to make sure that I belonged, I gave in. And maybe this giving in or this compliance, this nicety or being nice is something that I identify with, while it's really an unconscious script running from childhood.
Great. I really love what narrative therapy brings into this. They talk about kind of dominant stories, that we have kind of one privileged story. And often it is, like you say, kind of like what other people have said about you. It can kind of come in different ways, but that can kind of dominate our perception. And it affects right? This is the important part. It affects how we see things and how we act, right? Like this belief or this idea has an impact. And often we even protect kind of how we see, oh, this is my identity. I'm going to protect it. I'm going to refuse information that doesn't kind of fit in with this. So it's really kind of, it's a fascinating thing, identity. It's a necessary thing, right? We're social animals. Like this thing has come up where we've developed some idea about ourselves, and that's going to just be part of our lives socially. But it's very fascinating and tricky for a lot of people.
Where have you seen it, John, in top athletes, soccer, that identity is helpful?
Yeah, identity helpful? I think it's an approach to identity that would be helpful, not identity in and of itself, right? I think of people who are kind of comfortable with themselves, right? I'm this kind of person. This is kind of what I like. Those things are really helpful. With athletes, often they're younger people. They're trying to make their way in the world, right? Some of this is developmental. We can think of, adolescence as a time when you're really, who am I in relation to others? Who am I? That's really a dominant question. So if people can have some comfort, some knowing who they are and some comfort with some kind of core ways they act, and then also not be too defensive around it, right? You start getting in the public realm for athletes, and then it becomes about protection and boundaries. And so that could be kind of a tricky thing to navigate. Often I find people who are really serious in their profession, it's hard for them really to explore themselves in a lot of different ways. I think that the athlete culture has gotten better about like, hey, you can be someone outside of soccer. That's allowed more than it used to be, but it's still pretty restrictive. So those are just some thoughts on, what I see in sports. How's that land for you too?
Yeah, when I hear you, it's really, when we have an identity, we want to protect it. We start behaving accordingly. Of course, our social surroundings like it when we are consistent in the way that we show up. We protect it, and like a question that I often have in coaching is, what do you gain from it, and what are you avoiding? So, with an identity, if you have an identity of being tough, the question is really, what are you gaining from it? Oh, feel good. It helps you center, maybe focus, maybe achieve certain things. But what you might be avoiding is a level of vulnerability. And so it is, identity often is narrow, much narrower than the entirety. And I think that's what you're saying as well, that narrow identity doesn't work for people, or it works for a time, for a certain period, and then it stops working.
Yeah, identity is one of the biggest drivers of behavior. If people identify with their identity, it predicts how they will behave. So if you're a fighter, you will fight in the game if that's what you believe about yourself. Or I'm a person who doesn't stop till the game is over. Then you're much more likely to fight till the last minute. So there is identity in sports really helpful to choose helpful elements of the identity, because they will set up your behavior. And if you're only that, then you get that shadow element with of the things that you leave out.
Yeah, that's great. And I'd love to hear your take more on the shadow element. If you guys could add to that, is what you notice in sports and in social settings in general, right? There's some accommodation we do. We all adjust to our surroundings, in some ways adapt to the environment, right? And it's how much of that is, hey, I'm still connected with myself and know myself, and I'm just adjusting to this environment, and how much of it is actually kind of giving up parts of ourselves. And I think this is where, right, the shadow comes in, because you do see that in sport cultures where it's maybe like, hey, you have to be like this, you have to do this, and a lot of times that's not true, right? You have to perform well, That's why you're there, to perform well. And there's many kind of different ways of being an athlete. So I just wanted to get that out there. But that is a tricky thing in kind of leaning into the environment, adapting to what it's asking. Certain behaviors, certain things are appreciated, right? Toughness is appreciated. Vulnerability might not be. So how do you kind of manage that without losing yourself and things going into the shadow?
Yeah, I think identity can become really limiting, and that's also what you're expressing there. When we cling to a certain identity, we're trying to protect it, and as a result, we will reject or deny certain experiences that don't fit with our identity, or that threaten our identity. For example, if I see myself as nice and someone who likes harmony, that in itself is not so problematic, but it becomes problematic when I keep on favoring harmony over tension or conflict. So if I find myself in a situation that I have certain feelings about, or that I think about in a certain way, and I'm unable to express them because I'm fearing conflict, then my identity of being the harmonious one, of being the nice one, is really threatening my own authenticity and my own self-expression.
Well, I hear that once identity becomes rigid, it becomes problematic. And it's a little bit, you look in a mirror and you think that is what you see is what it is. And so you believe your identity. And then if you really believe I'm an harmonious person and conflict is not good, then you get in the stuckness of the identity. What you describe is already, you've come to the conclusion that, I favor harmony and I find conflict difficult. Then you're almost already in the identity of, I'm a person who finds conflict difficult. So your identity has already descended into a more malleable space where it becomes workable. In a jump, what comes now to me, you see it more like with Ajax or the Dutch team. The Dutch team had as an identity that they were an attacking style, the total football. That was their identity, and they were great at it, and they put it on the map, and they came really far with it. And now they're in a place where that identity doesn't match the players they have. They cannot play that style with the current players. So now the Netherlands becomes a bit stuck in, if I believe I need to play this, then you go home very quick because your team players don't allow for it. And we've seen it with Ajax too. Under Farioli, they started playing a different style. And people complained about it. It's not the Ajax DNA and identity. Well, you're rigidly in the past and not having adapted to, you need to shift a little bit your way of being, your identity, to adapt. And that is what I hear when I hear you talk on the individual level, when identity becomes a chokehold on creative expression. You shared earlier, I think this week with me when we talked, John, about how one of the Ajax coaches tried to infuse your American identity or try to awaken that a little bit more so that you had a certain part of that, those qualities in your game.
Yeah. I mean, identity can be a way to think about the world, right? What characteristics are out there that we want to be, maybe we don't have. Yeah, the story is that I think it was a second team coach at Ajax, and he kind of criticized me. He's like, he did it in a joking way, but like, you've become very Dutch in your style. Where's the fight? Where's the American fight? which I was laughing about because I feel like in other environments like HR wouldn't like be okay with you commenting on your nationality like in that way. But yeah, so it was a way for him to kind of poke at me and ask for something, wanted me to fight a little more and kind of bring that into my game, you know, where I think I had something I enjoyed as a soccer player was kind of learning the Dutch way. I went over to Holland when I was 16 and was in the Ajax Academy for 4 years, really, 2 years in the youth and 2 years in the reserve team. And their way of soccer is, I found it just fantastic, the technical, tactical type of soccer. So there's something in me that enjoyed that. And I did identify as a technical player, but also as a fighter. I think those two words would come up for me.
Yeah, and I wonder if identity and achievement, you know, when I think of a client that was a manager, but I think the same applies to people in sports. This manager identified with being competent. And as he identified with it, it became a little bit rigid, tried to prove it, tried to improve, started pushing away certain experiences. And when we talked about that we aimed at freeing him from the pressure that he had put on himself by identifying him in a certain way, so that he would have more access to his creativeness, to his goofiness, to his playfulness. And I think when we want to allow that flow state, we need an identity that, of course, supports or makes it possible or creates the conditions that something can come up, and that you can listen and act on that impulse.
Yeah, I really like that. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking more and more about how identity is really a cognitive concept. Right? It's an idea, right? And so it is restrictive in some ways, right? Where we want to be able to feel our feelings and have our instincts with us as well, and not tied too much to the concept. What does that bring up for you, Michiel?
Yeah. Well, the Jungian notion of the persona. So in Jungian psychology, people have a persona. It comes from the Greek word mask. So we have a mask that we present to the world. And it's not identical to identity, but it is very close. So the doctor has a persona of the doctor, and that is great because we need to feel that there is a doctor. Or when you step in a plane, you want to have someone with a uniform that looks like a pilot, that does something. That's their persona, that's their work identity. And work identity is great that way. And of course, the pilot or the doctor is more than just the pilot and the doctor. They're full human beings where you have these other aspects as well. And if the outside world mirrors back to you, you are such a gentle person. Then before you know, you want to be a gentle person, and you start creating a self-identity of a gentle person. And then it leaves out that the assertive, aggressive side, the shadow in Jungian psychology, gets relegated into the margins, and you become one-sided. So identity drives behavior and is really helpful and is necessary. And the big danger is if we only believe your identity, you believe only the tip of the iceberg of what you really are. And
yeah. And to add, Akke-Jeanne, I see you want to get in here. I just want to add, and the rigidity also comes with symptoms, right? Like often if we're just the tip of the iceberg, we can experience anxiety, depression, different symptoms come up in relation to that. So I just wanted to add that's an issue. What do you want to say, Akke-Jeanne?
Yeah, I also had an association, you know, like in soccer, when someone identifies with a position like being the striker or the number 9, if you really identify with that position, you want to behave accordingly, you want to protect it, and it might become a little bit more difficult to, for example, if there's suddenly also an attacking team, to have more of that defensive role. Because you are identified with being an attacker. So I wonder if in sports it shows up like that.
Yeah, I was just thinking of a player I played with at Ajax who was super hyped as a striker. And I was thinking how, right, like as an impressionable teen, right? We're impressionable, right? We're going to kind of change in different ways as we're aging and growing into ourselves. I think that idea of what a striker is, how they act, oh, they're attacking, they don't care, they're a little bit ruthless, right? These are kind of personality dimensions, I think, that he would adopt due to the role or try to embody in some way due to the role, right? And other parts of him, like you're saying, are kind of not being privileged as much. But I just wonder for him how much that affected his adaptability and really getting to know himself, right? I think in Jungian psychology, a beauty is, and what I see in my role as a counselor to people, is kind of helping people get to know themselves, the magic of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you were talking, I thought if you identify with a striker and you're not scoring, then your identity is also suffering. Right? Because you're not, the experiences don't fit with your identity. And so you get more tensed. The tension gets into the body, and that makes it even more difficult to play and to let go. In one of the previous episodes, John, you said, in order to strive for gold, there is also a non-striving. So, in that identity, can you also allow for a non-identity in a way to be there, so that you can really be in the moment and follow that spontaneous impulse, gesture, the creativity?
Yeah, and most helpful if you can create then an identity that you're someone who's in the moment. Because there is identity supportive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering that because I do find myself using the terms identity sometimes in the counseling room as, right, you are someone who can handle tough things, right? Like in a way, kind of helping someone see themselves differently that is good.
Well, I was still thinking about that soccer player and their identity. When they're in their non-identity, they're in a flow. And you can see this also at this World Cup with some players, or at least what I think as a supporter, but correct me if I'm wrong. But I see players taking their time, they're smiling, they're having a good time, and they're not too worried about the expectations or how they're being perceived. They take the ball and they pause for a minute before, and as a spectator, you're really looking like, kick the ball, but they're really, really calm. You can just see they're in a different flow. So there's, I'm watching non-identity, although as a supporter, I experience a lot of identity, because if they win, I win. It's we win. And if they lose, we lose. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great example of you're a fan, but the team, but there's some connection there. And this same thing happens in the mind, right? I'm a winner. I lose or I don't win. There's like a tie between the concept, whether it's, your team and you're part of the team, or whether it's in your mind, how you label your identity and your connection with that.
So what would we say from a depth psychological view on performance? What are things people can take away from our conversation on the performance and identity?
Well, I really like what Michiel said about how identity is a big predictor of behavior. And I'm gonna sometimes when people have real rigid identities, they can be successful, right? That happens. There's certain players you might think of, megalomaniacs, right? Who like, they believe something and it's just kind of work for them. For most people, that does not work, right? You can't create a whole world around you that just reflects back kind of what you believe in yourself. There's some adaptation to reality. And with that comes a lot of great character things, humility, trust, warmth, like a lot of great things come with that. So that was something I wanted to highlight about performance.
Yeah, you have a couple of course, there's a part of, you need to think you're really good to play. And there's different than when you have your identity of, I need to be the best. And there's only a very few people who are the best. And so once in a while, the person who thinks they're the best is the best. And that will work out for a while till the career goes down or the performance doesn't need it. And then you see that they struggle with not being the best. And yeah.
Yeah, and retirement from sport has just been a big thing. This comes to a head, and it did for me as well when I retired. Like, that was a huge identity moment. Like, who am I? I'm not a soccer player. Who am I? What do I like? You know, what do I want to do? How do people see me? How do I grieve kind of like this changing role, right? Because there's some struggle with change, right? There's some pain that comes with it. So in sports psychology, they talk about athletic identity and kind of, if you have an athletic identity or a myopic athletic identity, it can be a risk for things like transition or things like your sport not working out. You're not scoring goals. But if you have a broader based identity, hey, I'm a soccer player, but I'm also, you know, a person who likes to go throw the ball with my dog. I'm a sibling, or I have a friend group, right? These other things that kind of bring things to life. Often that can be a really regulating place for athletes to have a little broader based identity and be able to manage the ups and downs that naturally come with being at a high level sport.
Well, we're going to see this World Cup, the final, most likely the final performance of Ronaldo on the World Cup. He's 41 and has, and it will be very interesting to see, can he still perform on 41, that he is a support to his team, or is his identity of wanting to be the best and winning and all these things he for sure used to be, now blocking the flow of the new generation that's behind him, because the team will have to adapt to his style. So it's going to be interesting. It could work and it could not work, and this World Cup will show that.
And Akke-Jeanne, what would be your recommendations for someone like Ronaldo? What do you think would make him help him be a happier person in this situation as an aging athlete? Do you have any ideas? I have ideas about it.
Similar to you, I think, or what you expressed earlier, hold your identity lightly. And I think that is really almost a daily practice, not to identify too much with the one thing that you're doing. And even though when you like it, reflect on the reasons why are you doing it? Does it come from genuine pleasure? Because then you don't have to be at the world stage. You can continue to do it. Or do you do it to prove something? And I think that is interesting in depth psychology anyways, that we distinguish between the deeper motives. What is really driving someone to be the best or to claim an identity of the best. Is it a compensation for a wounding, or is it related to a wounding in the past? Or is it something that someone genuinely feels living through them and acting on that? What is that impulse of wanting to be the best or wanting to play? So that doing an inquiry, what is really driving me, what's truly driving me, might be part of my suggestion. And then another one before I go over to you. Is often people think about personal development. New things need to be developed. New skills, new attitudes, which is true, but personal development often also is letting go and grieving, and so that some transformation can take place, so that really speaks to what you were saying earlier. But you said already, like, I also have some ideas. I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I think you said it great. And right, like letting yourself adapt to a changing situation, right? It can be painful, but like there's really a beauty in doing that. Just feeling the feelings, grieving, things are changing. Who am I? But there's a beauty in discovering what's new, discovering a new role, being able to relate to people. In some ways, right, if you stay rigid in your identity, you're less in your environment. You're less in reality, really. We talk about it that way. So I think in Jungian psychology, it really is an invitation into reality, however painful it might be at times.
Well, he wants to be the best in the world. And it's really important for Ronaldo to be the best in the world. He has that more than Messi. Messi is not claiming I'm the best of the all time, or I am better than Ronaldo. You don't hear him say these things. And Ronaldo is saying those things. In interviews, Ronaldo says, I am better than Messi. And he has a deep desire to be the best. And and there the questions.
And he's not. And he's not now, right? That's like everyone sees it, right? Like, and he can go on believing it, but he's not the best in the world now. No.
Yeah. So back to the topic of identity, we really explored personal identity so far, and in this World Cup with all those countries, let's also explore collective identity.
Well, I am wearing orange today as an expression of the Dutch orange identity. As a little factoid for the people that are listening, the Dutch team always plays in orange. And that is because of, technically it's the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And one of the names of the king is Van Oranje, from Orange. And that is why they play in orange. And today I'm wearing my orange identity. So there as a starter.
Nice. And there's such a unique fan culture around the Oranje. It's really fun, all right? Like football can be inhabited by hooliganism or like aggression, and the Dutch have never had that in supporting the national team. In U.S. culture, the fan culture of USA is very diverse and differentiated and not as clear. The cultural norms, I think, around how you talk about soccer, how you think, it's very different and diverse. It's not as unified. Kind of a reflection maybe of our country, developing later and developing in soccer later. So as an identity, it's been interesting hearing all the storytelling that's been going on. Oh, this is the history of U.S. soccer, where we came from. Like that's all being put in the media as you're trying to kind of formulate some stories around like who we are as a soccer country.
I like that. I described personal identity as the answer, who are you? And collective identity is really, who are we? And then there's again those collection of stories, and the orange is a big part of it. But it even goes back to things in history, like the Dutch team in 1974 was playing so beautiful that it's still part of the Dutch soccer identity. And I remember that Michiel and my father were listening to this vinyl record that we had of that match, that they were listening to over and over again to re-experience that, which I think says something about about the origins or about Dutch identity around soccer?
I think back in the days, each country had much more a clear identity of the way they would play. The Dutch had total football. The Italians had catenaccio, which is a defensive system with fast counters attack. England had kick and rush. And so identities were the cultural qualities expressed themselves in the style of the soccer. And cultures had different identities that way.
Yeah, and right, you could also think of a cultural shadow too, right? Like what is privileged. And I think for Holland, right, you got to talk about Johan Cruyff if you're thinking about culture and how people identify. And I felt this when I was at Ajax, this kind of, hey, we're brave, we're technical, we don't care. We got a little bit of an attitude, right? A very Amsterdam attitude in Holland. It's not all the way in Holland, but like that part of the identity, I think shapes current players. It shaped me at Ajax. It shaped other players. And there's probably parts of ourselves in ways, right? We identify as, and tell me as Dutch people how you identify in your culture. But there's parts you privilege again and parts of you that kind of get less privileged and put into the cultural shadow.
Yeah. And in the Dutch way of seeing, especially back in the days, was the Italian way. That's a shadow. That's not what we do. We want to play dominant soccer, attractive. And I think you can even see it in the songs they have. Like the American, at the last World Cup, it struck me that they would chant, "We believe that we can win." That would never be in the Dutch. They would never say, "We believe we can win." That is, and that was a bit of a martial quality, and we believe we can win. And the Dutch would sing in a slightly more superior way, "We're gonna teach you how to play soccer," and then have that dominant attacking style by which they would play great soccer and win. That's the identity, and it's also the identity they love. These days, that identity doesn't hold because they don't have the players. Other countries have adopted from other styles. So Spain plays Johan Cruyff 2.0, and just like PSG and Manchester City are evolved expressions of the Dutch identity. So identity has changed, and Europe has changed, and identities shift. So the preferred identity, we would love that the Dutch would go to the world stage and teach the rest of the world how to play soccer. It would be fantastic. It's just
an identity as a teacher, right? There's something about Dutch identifying as teachers, like, oh, we're going to give you a lesson. Like something about that feels tied to the culture.
Yeah. I'm also thinking, we've got individual identity and we've got collective identity. And collective identity helps us to belong, that we're part of a group, right? The other day, I saw for the first time this Dutch guy in the national team. This was he in the pre-match before the World Game. Never seen the guy before. He stepped onto the field with his orange shirt, and he was immediately one of us. And I thought that's so interesting how that sense of belonging. You wear an orange shirt and you're one of us, and that really does something really lovely on an emotional, psychological, physical level to belong. And of course, there's a little bit of friction because there's also the desire and the need for individual expression. So the individual and and the collective may clash.
Well, anytime the identity becomes a chokehold on who you really are, it's an issue. But it's also important to know with what you say with that shirt. Identity is like a shirt. And the French people have a blue shirt, and the Spanish have a red shirt, but they all have a shirt. And so people are all people, and that's the basic shared humanity, and there's no difference. And identity is fun because we put on an orange shirt out of this location, and you put on a red shirt for your location. But never think that the shirt is who you are. That is, there we create identity politics, hooligans get from it, violence comes from it. Identifying with a limited part of the culture or the personality of being human is dangerous.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, a little social lesson, maybe identifying as humans or inhabitants of the planet, something a little broader where we don't create friction. Yeah, right. Team belonging. I love that. And it relates really strongly to performance. Right. If you feel like you don't belong, right, maybe the first time a Dutch fan or US fan kind of puts on the shirt and is like going and sitting in the fan section, or a player's walking into the locker room to an established team, right? There's a lot of social monitoring that's going to happen, right? We're a social species. We're always managing our impressions, and we're managing our relationships. And that takes a lot of energy, right? Focusing on what people are doing. What do I need to do here? How do I fit in? What's the hierarchy, right? There's a lot of nuance to all that. If you can get past that, and that usually takes time, building some familiarity, right? And you feel like you belong, that there's a trust there, you can kind of let go of that, and more creativity can come out physiologically. And this is what I talk a lot about with athletes, our bodies, right? It can relax a little more, and when we're in a little bit more of a relaxed state, more creativity can come out, more expression of yourself, that individuality. So belonging is really a huge thing that actively these coaches are working on, kind of creating in their environment, and that the players really are trying to manage and feel at times.
Yeah, so there's a beautiful positive element of identity. That if I belong to the identity of Ajax, or to the identity of the Golden Ball podcast, I feel part of it, and I can much easier express myself. And it is also fun to be part of something. And in teams like PSG, that they Paris Saint-Germain, that they have an identity. They have adopted a new identity since a couple of years when Luis Enrique came. That everyone was part of the team that needed to defend and be offensive, and the players that didn't match that identity, like Mbappé, went on, and Mbappé can become massively successful, but his identity didn't match the identity that the coach wanted to play. So belonging didn't happen, and team play didn't happen.
Yeah, and that of course is something for the individual to make decisions. Do I comply? Do I do what the group needs me to belong? And to what extent is that a true expression of who I am? Or do I feel more drawn into individual expression, and that there's no one fit for it?
No, and I bet that the French team will favor Mbappé's personal style at this World Cup, and he might very well become the star of the tournament.
Yeah, I think of roles and responsibilities and team culture in general, kind of knowing your role, what your responsibilities are, and how those shift, right? And coaches are actively kind of encouraging people to take on roles that are maybe less familiar to them or less wanted, right? A lot of times in youth sport, you want to be the striker, you want to be the playmaker, and Eventually, hey, that's not working out, but you can be this position, you can do this, right? There's different adjustments, and do you feel comfortable adjusting to that? Can you not, right? It also plays into identity. I want to mention briefly about going back to belonging again, because I think this is something I saw a lot in professional sport culture, is I think there's a lot of belonging wounds, right? We join a team, we're social animals. Naturally, we're hopeful that we can kind of connect, feel appreciated, and belong. But you see this kind of professionalism or cynicism develop of like, oh, I'm in here for myself. No one really cares. And it's kind of true, right? Like people select you based on your performance, and you could be out of the team or moving teams. But I think it's really about a wound to that belonging feeling, and people, express it. It hurts when you're deselected from a team. You want to be part of a culture. And so I invite people to talk about, those feelings of like, yeah, how did it feel when, you weren't included in this? And really acknowledge that that's part of being human, is having these desires to belong and feeling accepted. And when that doesn't work out, it can hurt.
Yeah. I hear a couple of times you bring up this sense of heartbreak, and how heartbreak breaks open identity that allows for a new person to emerge, and that sometimes heartbreak is the identity breaker.
Yeah. And that's also a topic that we will discuss in a later episode, how to deal with setbacks and losses. Just to wrap this episode up, are there any final thoughts?
Well, the thought that comes up is look at your dream tonight and see which character comes by and what does it do. And would you say that is part of you or that is not you? And then after that, it does show up in your dream. So think about that.
That's great. And I'd say, getting out of our cognitions, our thoughts about who we are, and sometimes listening to our bodies, our emotions, what our dreams or images might say, right? Those are all ways to get to know the shadow parts of ourselves, or parts of ourselves we normally don't privilege in our identities. And they could be real resources for everyone going forward, give them a lot of vitality and a lot of skills in adapting to life.
Yeah. And to spin on that, often shadow work, it sounds so technical, like integrate your shadow or do something with your shadow. But what it really comes down to is, can you tolerate when this part of you or this experience comes up, and can you tolerate it in your body? When you identify as this harmonious person, can you tolerate aggression in your body without acting out immediately? So to bring that into a suggestion is to see what you can stand in your body. Well, thanks for today.
Thanks,
everyone.